Instead of a dark one, what wholesome secret are you hiding? My stepmother doesn't know she's going to spend the rest of her life living with my family because I feel a sense of duty to her. My dad wasn't the best to her, and he drank himself to death immediately after a quadruple bypass. She never got to have kids because he had a vasectomy after I was born, and the reversal didn't work. The life insurance policy I guilted my dad into getting was only $50K, and it's gone. My brother completely rejected her as a mother. She's so happy when she's with my kids. And a disappointing life has taken its toll on her. I want her final years to be easy and happy, to feel like she has a family that is not ruled by alcohol. My grandmother's last husband is now our immediate family because he doesn't have anyone and begged us not to abandon him after her death. She was a raging alcoholic most of their marriage, which often left him feeling lost and abandoned by his own circle of people. We didn't. Instead, he's been skydiving twice, traveled to Playa del Carmen, Pensacola Beach, and Boston with us. This is all in the last year. He will be 90 in January. We will never abandon him. She's probably so happy to have you. I'd lost my phone and my 5-year-old niece was helping me look for it and she was really bummed out that she couldn't find it. I eventually found it and put it where she would find it. Seeing her run up to me with it, all smiles and everything, was so cute lol. When my husband did something similar but with keys for my 2-year-old nephew. One of the reasons I fell in love with him. Years ago I was management for a very large company. The company also had one of the absolute strictest attendance policies I've ever heard of. To the point that employees had to abuse the FMLA system for just basic doctor's visits and appointments in order for it to not count against them. So many times I would have employees that were so sick they could barely stand, but they came in anyway because they needed the job. It was one of those places that offered paid sick time, but always wrote the people up for using them. It was ridiculous, and the legality of it was scrupulous at best, but they got away with it. I lost count the number of times I had to be the bad guy and enforce their insane policies, just to keep my job. One day, I had enough when I had a guy whose little girl had fallen and broken her arm at gymnastics. He was one occurrence away from termination. His wife was with their other kids out of town. If he left work he would have been fired, no matter the cause. That's how heartless that place was. I told him to go, I'd handle it. Not sure what I was going to do, I sat down for a minute before calling into dispatchers to let them know the guy was off the workload the rest of the day. I needed an excuse that would stick and not raise suspicion. So I looked at the workload, and did some quick figuring on things and realized that if I claimed that we didn't have enough work for all of the techs, then we needed to send someone home. Being as how he had just finished an assignment, he was first done, so he was first that could go. The thing is, our workload wasn't that small. So, what I did was get a hold of our dispatchers, make up a story that I just didn't understand how to read that system that well I guess, oops, and accidentally let a guy go home when I shouldn't have. It was entirely my fault, blah blah blah. I was willing to take the heat as I had a lot more pull with the higher ups and could maybe survive a little longer than the average worker. Then the dispatcher let me in on a secret. They could close our queue for taking in new projects for a day at any time. And they didn't mind doing it unless someone did something crazy, like close it for a few days or something that no one even noticed. So going forward, anytime one of my employees had a legit emergency, got sick, whatever, I just let them go, then got with the dispatcher to have them close the queue, since we aren't that busy, and that would ensure that it remained not that busy that day, allowing for us to be a person down. I also made sure I never abused it either. Had a few folks try, but they were pretty easy to expose as trying to just get off work. ETA. Unfortunately, doing that only saved the people from disciplinary action and termination. If they still billed to their sick time, they'd still get written up. But, since management sent them home, it was excused. If they wanted to get paid, they'd have to use vacation time, which usually couldn't be used unless it was scheduled from the beginning of the calendar year. I wanted to be able to do more, but unfortunately that was the best I could get them. In 6th grade, one anonymously nominated one of my teachers for a Recognition of Excellence award. It was 2001. Over the course of roughly 2 months 9/11 happened, my 17-year-old cousin passed away, and my grandmother died on Halloween. She was such a creative and passionate teacher. She brought a group of awkward 11-year-olds together where everyone not only participated, but did so enthusiastically. I never felt so bonded to and accepted by a group of my peers, and it was all due to her. I later found out she had been battling cancer. The next semester in the spring she announced she had become aware of the nomination and said thank you to whoever in the class who submitted it in a way that just showed gratitude and left it open-ended to claim without pressure. She must have known it was me from certain details in my nomination letter. She sent me a thank you card at the end of the school year. In fall of 2002 I went to go visit her after summer break and found out her health had declined to the point she had resigned from teaching. She passed within a year. I never told anyone I nominated her, and I'm so glad she knew I did. I think about her all the time. My mom was a third-grade teacher, so I witnessed all the behind-the-scenes stuff that no one ever knows. She worked through 7 years of cancer and retired only when she literally couldn't do it anymore. She died shortly thereafter. She had a seemingly endless supply of love and patience for her students, which I think they felt because they would come back and visit her well into their high school years. Not all teachers are good ones, but she really was. So, as her daughter, I thank you for appreciating these unsung heroes. Every time my grandmother gave me money or paid me for doing her a favor, I always slipped the money back into her purse or hid it in her house when she wasn't paying attention. Sometimes when I had no choice but to leave with it, I'd trade it for smaller bills and hide it next time I visited. She never knew. There were a lot of times we'd be talking over the phone or something and she'd get excited because she found monies. It's nothing special, but it's something that makes me happy. And I know she's happy giving money when she can, so it's a win-win. Y'all better not tell her either. I used to go on walks with my grandma and she absolutely loved finding money in the street, so my cousin and I would walk ahead of her and casually drop coins. She would ooh and ah, and exclaim about how it was her lucky day and, can you believe that she found 71 cents on this walk? In retrospect, she definitely knew that it was us, but we were happy because Grandma was happy, and she was happy because we were. The next day she would pay us 2 cents per snail to remove snails from her pear tree, and we would do it all again. I worked at a KFC for maybe 3 weeks back in 2005. I came out the back door one night after closing the place down to find several homeless guys huddled around the dumpster, digging through it to find the excess food we'd thrown out. That was some haunting shit, so for the rest of the short time I worked there, our excess food didn't go in the dumpster. I just left it on the back step. Fucking Colonel Sanders could afford to take the hit so those poor bastards could eat a halfway decent meal without having to dig through garbage for it. Where I live, there is a place called the Blessing Box. It's a cabinet where people can drop off canned and dry goods to help feed other families. Wife and I hit some hard times financially and had to rely on the Blessing Box to feed ourselves. Made a promise to myself that if I ever came into some extra cash, I would return the blessing. Later on, I scored a well-paying temp job and was able to catch up on a lot of bills right before Thanksgiving. Remembering the promise I made, I used my next paycheck to fill the Blessing Box to the brim with a variety of canned goods. Everything a family would need for the holiday. A few days later, the Blessing Box was featured on the local news and how an unknown donor provided enough food to feed over a dozen low-income families for the holiday. Wife and I have never told a soul that it was us. Okay, this is a fun one and fits nicely with the upcoming holiday, and I've been dying to share it. So my parents live on about an acre of land and they've been paying me to mow it every couple of weeks with this old, busted-up push mower. It's about 4 hours of work and it sucks. So, of course my dad has always wanted a rider mower, and this year my mom decided to get him one. She found a seemingly great deal on Marketplace, but she feared that her lack of knowledge about mowers might cause her to spend a decent amount on something that could be crap, so she needed an expert. So who does she take? My dad. So, of course, she needs an excuse. So she tells him that her best friend is looking at getting this mower. She has a small farm outside of town and works with my mom at a local school, so it all checks out. So my dad agrees and goes to look over this mower, which, unbeknownst to him, is his Christmas present. It gets better. They go to look at the mower. He says it's pretty good and actually manages to talk the guy down in price, saying, "Hey, my wife's friend is working off a teacher's salary and has a pretty big property she takes care of." So the seller cuts $200 off the price and they load it into my dad's truck. Then, my mom has to come up with an excuse to keep him from just taking it over to her friend's house. So she tells him her garage is full and if they could just hold on to it for a couple of weeks until she has time to clear out a space for it. So they take it home and since he uses his truck for work starts unloading it. Mom goes inside, an hour goes by, she's not sure where Dad is. She goes outside to find him riding around in it, testing it. I went over the other day and there sits the mower, tarped up and awaiting Christmas Day. Needless to say, I'm more excited to see him react to it than I am about anything I might get this year. Plus, it's a present for me as well since I never have to mow their lawn again, or at least not with a push mower. We did this to my dad a few years ago with a smoker grill. It was supposed to arrive a week before Christmas and we couldn't wait to surprise him. Day before Thanksgiving rolls around and my dad answers the phone about a delivery to the auto shop down the road. Our road wasn't big enough for the delivery truck so the shop let us deliver it there and he is really confused because as far as he knew we didn't order anything. So he told my mom the phone was for her. Not only did the smoker come early, it was a whole month early. So my dad and brother went and got it, spent all day putting it together and Dad ended up smoking the Thanksgiving turkey on it. I still think that is the only time we have ever been able to actually surprise him with a present. He is usually the one surprising us, so it was totally worth it to see the confusion and happiness on his face. I buy hundreds of pounds of birdseed every year and keep all the bird feeders in the windows of the residence rooms of our nursing home full. They all love watching the birds and think the facility provides it. I buy by the 100 pounds at the farmer's supply for cheap, costs me about $30 a month. I keep a few hummingbird feeders going in the summer and have put up some birdhouses. I love birds, it makes me happy too. I often forget basic things so my parents still feel like I need them in a small way. They are just becoming empty nesters and I can tell it was hard on them. Every so often I'll call Ma and ask for something silly like a recipe or who to call for an appointment, same with my old man. I call often about car questions and things like that. I don't ever want them to feel like they are without value simply because we moved on with our lives. 2018-2019. This was during my college years because I remember I only hung out with a friend while I was in my last few years of education. We was walking through our town center, going to get the bus back home. I tend to get distracted and always end up just watching the area around me, to which I notice a man had dropped a good few notes which he dropped out his pocket when grabbing his phone. It didn't help the fact that he seemed stressed, panicked whilst speed walking along. I decide the best thing to do is to grab it and return it to him, because if I didn't do anything then the worst outcome would be that he'd not get it back. I quickly grab the money before anyone else and run over to the guy and return his money. I realized he needed it a lot, because he burst into tears and quickly hugged me as thanks. I've never told anyone about that situation. Only the friend I was with knows and I never thought it to be important to share with anyone. That's the closest I have to a wholesome secret. Anytime either of my kids has a school field trip, I anonymously pay for a student that wouldn't otherwise go due to financial reasons. I was always that kid, sitting in a strange class because my class was off doing something else. It sucked. I got a girl in my class who was my friend a Valentine's card who never got any attention from guys. I never liked her in that way but wanted her to be happy. No joke, she seemed to develop more confidence from that day and got a boyfriend a year later, then got married a bit after that and is really happy. I even heard her talking about it one day in a group setting and how happy it made her, and I had to stay really quiet because I wanted it to stay special for her. Whenever I go shop for my mom I always just reduce the price of it all so she sends me less money when I get back. And other times I'll just buy stuff I know we need that she hasn't noticed yet so she doesn't have to. A few years back we were having a very stressful time, moved out of state, old house broken into 2 days after we left, everything taken, the toilet upstairs was ripped out, flooded the upstairs, ceiling caved in, flooded downstairs, completely totaled the house. So, I thought of fun things to do for Christmas. We always loved IRN brew at Scottish games, and so I put a bottle of IRN brew into each of the kids' stockings with some other things. It was so much fun. They have looked forward to it every year. Over dinner the other night, the kids were talking about how excited they are to get their one bottle of IRN brew this Christmas. And I nonchalantly told them that there was an IRN brew shortage in Scotland this year, due to the economy and global inflation, and it might be tough to get some. Wild panic ensued. I bought a case of IRN brew back in August and it's in my closet. And there is no IRN brew shortage. Fake news. I lose cash everywhere. Friends' places, gently tucked into the booth at restaurants, just on the floor in a public place. I lightly believe in karma, and while it started ironically, I now full-heartedly believe that when I lose a few bucks here and there, then that money goes to the person who deserves it. It's one of the few things I have thought of that has little to no chance of being caught for it. I also do the same with myself. I intentionally forget cash in my jacket pockets, then it's a nice surprise later in life.